How can you be in peace and not peace at the same moment? The frank answer is you can't. No, actually, to a certain degree you can, because you see, your consciousness, a great deal of it can be looking in one direction and part of it looking at another. You know, you can be walking through the park and also looking for a gumball machine. In other words, you're not losing contact with the whole park just because you're looking at a gumball machine. And yet if you don't parcel out part of your attention. So part of your attention is focused here. In spiritual work, it's quite a subtle balance between how much energy is within, how much is without, how much is into context, and how much is into content. The prevailing technique that I suggest to people is one really of contemplation. It's really a contemplation in a way, an ongoing thing of its own. That as things arise, one spontaneously, after a while, becomes spontaneous, surrenders them to God, and relinquishes one's attachment. As the fear that Kitty has lost arises, the fear is instantly, the spiritual master within me demands now that I release it as it arises. Within 1 minute later, it's no longer there. So we surrender things to God as they arise, in the very process of arriving this. As they arise, so surrendering is a continuous process. The fixity of focus, if I could say I have any fixity of focus when in the world, or at least it was, the surrenderingness of everything as it arises. Whether 10 million die in a civil war in a certain place in the world is irrelevant. It's irrelevant whether 10 million die. But you have to be in a certain space to understand the truth of that. First of all, no death is possible. The quality of life is such that it is not possible for life to die. You know? It's a good thing in spiritual work to get over the fear of death. One is to realize that it's said already. Secondly, you don't experience it anyway. Nobody can experience their own physical death. We reaffirm that each time. It's not possible to experience your own physical death, resist. Correct. You cannot experience your own death. First of all, it's said. Secondly, you're not going to experience it anyway. Thirdly, life is not capable of being killed. The intrinsic essence and quality of life is that it's indestructible. That's a fact. Okay. It's like the law of the conservation of matter. The law of conservation of life is even more true. Life can change form, but you cannot kill life. It's not possible to kill life. The minute you swat a fly, he goes right off into his etheric body, and he keeps right on flying, and then he gets reborn as another fly. Hardly notices the difference. Wasn't I here before, he says to himself? Can't remember if I was on this ship or not, was I? This is where the hamburgers are. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because life cannot be destroyed, there's no point in mourning death. No death is possible. So what are you crying about? What are you fearing? What are you saying? Isn't that awful? 30 million died? Why is it awful? It's awful to you? Did somebody tell you that's bad? Common belief is that it's bad. So you keep surrendering things until one is completely and totally surrendered all of life to God. Everything as it arises. And then you realize that what you've been surrendering wasn't a reality in the first place. All the great sacrifices you thought you were making were all illusions. Sacrificing your physicality to God. You thought you were surrendering life to God. You weren't surrendering life to God. Life cannot be surrendered to anything. Life is ongoing forever. because life itself is the expression of God. And unless you can kill God, you can't kill life. Huh? We have our preferences. So all you're letting go is preferences. A preference that you continue as this physicality and in its story, and you become enamored of its story. It isn't that you're unwilling to die, it's just you don't want to give up the story. What's more fascinating than the story of your own life? Tell me, nothing, right? I mean, is it entrancing? It's entrancing, isn't it? It's the great romance of all time, because we're all in love with ourselves secretly. And our story is the greatest story. And, well, anyway, I forget what the question was. What was the question? I guess we answered it. When dying, does going into the light keep you in the cycle of reincarnation? I don't quite get that. Well, it's asking about reincarnation, which is really next month's lecture. Jumping the gun. It has to do with the sense of the reality of that which is experiencing what is it experiencing. The only death that's possible is death of the ego. There's only one death possible. One only has to die once in all these lifetimes. You can live 10,000 lifetimes, but you're only really going to die once. And that's one of the requirements to reach enlightenment. And the requirement is the willingness to die. Because you don't get any chance to die. When you get hit by a bolt of lightning, you just go out. It's great being out. There's the body all fried up there. Well, that was a killer, that one. Yeah. I mean, you had so many deaths, they pile up over time. Dying at the oars, that was a victory. So each death seems to accomplish some great gain, When I died at the oars, I surrendered. And I thought, they can't keep me tied to this goddamn thing. And I just let myself die, and instantly I was out of it. Whoa, I'm free as a bird. So each death then seems to have within it a spiritual lesson. The only one death you can actually do, which we won't really get up to the last lecture, there's only one death you actually experience, and that is the experience of death itself. It's the only time you've ever had a chance to experience it, and it's the only time you'll ever have to go through it. And people need to be coached in advance about that state, because if you're a serious spiritual student, sooner or later you'll meet that door. So that'll be the last lecture, how to get through that door. There's only one death you ever have to. All right, so the preparation for what's required at the final door is what's going on now. Your devotion to God has to be absolute. The devotion to God has to supersede all else. And that's what carries you through the final door, is the willingness to surrender what you think and believe in your most inner conviction is life itself. I can't always read all these things. I need glasses, I guess, huh? Let's see what it says. Ready? We said attractor fields. We said from the viewpoint of nonlinear dynamics, chaos theory, each of these fields that calibrates here is a calibrated field of energy at the center of which there is a so-called attractor field. There's an attractor field. You might picture it like when you see the birds as they swing about in a huge flock and the design that they play. What you're seeing is the demonstration of an inner invisible attractor field. And that attractor field is dominating them. So what you think is that each bird is following another bird, like pilots in the sky. No, they're not. Each bird is following the inner, his own inner song. His own inner song is telling him to go this way. And this bird's inner song is also telling him to go this way. And this bird's inner song. Each bird is independently controlled by the energy field. They're not controlled by each other. They're not like pilots, 10 feet from you, 10 feet from you, 32 feet from you, 44 feet from you, and so on. That's the ego's view of it. No, each of these birds is surrendered to be the servant of its inner guide, and it goes as it's guided by the inner attractor field. And the way we isolate and identify an attractor field is merely by kinesiology. The number of people over 200, we say it's increased, yes. When we wrote the book in 95, I think we did the calibrations in 94, consciousness level, we said that, I forget all these numbers now, but the number of people on the planet who have risen in their level of consciousness has increased quite a bit. It was 80% of the people were less than 200, now it's only 78%. So the consciousness level of mankind is constantly rising. I mean, groups like this and the spiritual work they do, affects the whole field of consciousness. I mean, what we're doing and saying today is affecting the whole world. Let's see. That's a fact, is it? The ripples that go out are affecting the whole field of consciousness. So all the people in the world committed to the evolution of consciousness radiate out into the field, and that field is like the sea, and that sea then supports the consciousness of everyone. People elsewhere wake up in the morning and they suddenly make a different decision today than they have made all their life. I've always thought this way, and suddenly they say, I could see it this way. Well, that energy out there makes it harder to be negative. So it's harder to be negative now than it was. It's very hard to be negative. I mean, you got to work at it nowadays, You got to go off in some god-awful place on the planet and listen to some really weird people and get brainwashed in order to be that way. Now it's hard to do that. Do the demands of ordinary life interfere with spiritual evolution and work? No. As we said, everything gets contextualized differently now. Everything gets contextualized. And you shine everything out of love for God. You sweep the floor out of devotion to one's children and family. You peel the potatoes for the same reason. Can techniques which lower one's brainwave frequency also raise one's level of consciousness? I don't know. I never asked that. What their meaning is, they're talking about here, alpha wave training. The answer to this is yes. It says yes. There are various techniques. Or does it work in the opposite direction? Works in the opposite direction. The more advanced your consciousness gets, the slower your brain waves get. And finally, they become ridiculously low. You wonder how you survive. Anyway, there is a brainwave every once in a while that keeps you going. To function effectively in the world, you got to have 15 cycles per second. 14 or 15. So I have great hopes that President Bush is running at about 400, is running at beta rhythm, 10 to 14 or whatever it is. We didn't really answer the Bush question. The Bush question is one in which how you contextualize it. To defend one's honor, to defend the innocent, to stand for truth is archetypally the spiritual warrior. The spiritual warrior is not aggressive. The spiritual warrior, however, is extremely fierce if you challenge him. within ourselves, sooner or later we get confronted. And we have to find within ourselves the strength to stand up and defend truth, which is not an act of aggression. It's an act of assertion, and it's an act of confirmation. If suddenly somebody comes and starts destroying your world or destroying your people or destroying your country, then out of love for the remainder, out of love one defends against undue aggression. It would be Bush's responsibility. In fact, his oath of office would require that he support the Constitution and that he defend the life of Americans when they're under attack. That's his constitutional commitment, and I think it would be a spiritual failure not to do so. Let's see, okay? Let's just see if that's so. The president's commitment, which he has taken an oath, is to defend the American people against undue aggression resistance. He's under oath to do what he's doing, and he would be quite in error not to do so, to defend the innocent. So if someone is attacking your home and your family or your children, then you ethically and spiritually are entitled to defend that which is being attacked. You remember when Jesus chased the money changers out of the temple. I was wondering what that meant. You mean he was angry and had a fit or something? Didn't seem like Jesus to me would have a fit about the thing. No, but he came out of his spiritual warrior and said, this is an non-integrous. And it's a desecration of what the temple stands for. So he was like defending the truth. You understand what I'm saying? That explained it. So that was the first time I really understand what he was about there. He was sort of like indignant about the desecration. So like each of us feels a certain indignation that the innocence of these probably extremely devoted Muslim boys is being raped and taken over by that which is non-integrous, and telling them lies and getting them to destroy themselves in service to that which is the opposite of love and truth. All of us feel a certain indignation about it, indignation. You can take any young child, and brainwash them and into believing anything. And anybody's seen things on the History Channel about life in Hitler's Germany, remembers how the children were carefully brainwashed from childhood. They couldn't believe anything else except what they believed. So their innocence, their intrinsic innocence is taken advantage of. On the other hand, you have to defend yourself against them. You understand? You don't have to make somebody wrong to defend yourself against them. Out of innocence, they can run you over. Out of innocence, they can kill you. But so you have to take self-protection. So that's how I see Bush. He's obligated to defend the country against that which he considers to be attacked. The other thing about politics is, because what we know about politics only comes through the media. Well, what comes through the media has been strained, mangled, distorted, and twisted, and decided, and you don't know what the truth is. So you can't really have a political opinion because you don't know what the political facts really are. I've been in circles back east where over lunch, like it was nothing at all, great barons of industry and finance would say, oh, come on, 1/4 point. Yeah, all right, 1/4 point. The lives of millions of people have just gotten screwed. A 1/4 point to everybody's mortgage across 50 million people. Well, you're talking about billions, you know what I'm saying? So, does the public know that went on? No. Do we know what Bush knows about the international situation? We don't know what it is. Do we know what the Secret Service knows? We don't know what anybody knows. We can only go by so our opinions are already manipulated by the media, you see. The media are constantly manipulating. The news broadcast is constantly manipulating you. For instance, just by how many seconds they give to one scene rather than another scene, So if they're over on one side, they'll show you all the wounded Palestinians dying there, and if they're on the other side, they show you all the wounded Israelis dying there. And there's always the dead baby and the crying mother, always. That really rips people up. That's the old guaranteed one. Always the mother with the dying baby. Which side you give the most seconds to is the way you influence the minds of the populace. The collective minds of the populace is like a musical instrument, and the media merchants know how to play it. Nothing to it. The whole populace is like playable. You can just play them this way or play them that way. Give them a few more seconds this way, and you'll see the votes go up. Give it a few more seconds this way, the votes go down. So the real maestros of the media play the public like a musical instrument. Any kind of music you want, or decide any kind of music you want. We can get any kind of music we want out of public sentiment by political manipulation. This is all unconscious. Don't forget, most people are unconscious. Spiritually aware people start seeing through these illusions and the brainwashing of it to believe in certain beliefs. So we can't really judge what goes on because we don't know what goes on. Who knows what goes on in the secret rooms? As I say, I've been in clubs that were so exclusive the world doesn't even know they exist. And their decisions are made just like willy-nilly that affect the lives of millions. Nobody gets to vote on it. Your mortgage rate just goes up, that's all. You didn't get to vote on it. The Congress didn't get to vote on it. The president didn't get to vote on it. Nobody got to vote on it. Okay, can a person reach the high 600s? Oh yeah, this is a cute question. Can a person reach the level of 600 without passing through the 500s? And if so, must one then go back and backfill the 500s? That's cute. That's a really cute question. You find yourself up at 600 and say, oh man, I forgot the 500. I got to go back there and shovel some more dirt and earn my chevrons. No, the peculiar thing about it is, you see, context is so complex, it's not comprehensible. That's the wisdom of surrendering all judgmentalism to God. Because the reality is so profoundly complex, it's only when you see it you realize it's staggering. It's profoundly complex. Everything that ever existed, anywhere in existence, throughout of all of what we call time, is influencing subtly and powerfully every single decision, thought, choice. Every place you put your foot is already the result of the entire universe throughout all the time to make the decision to use that as a demonstration to this audience right at this moment, where the thought came from, is already the result of billions and trillions and multi-quadrillions of events, circumstances, influences, etc. This also, as we'll get to the next time, goes on through whole sequences of time and events. The beginning of the evolution of consciousness in the universe throughout all of time, then through the animal kingdom, then up through mankind, and the dissolution of the ego. So profoundly complex, then one can suddenly jump from almost any level up to an extremely high state for reasons unknown. I always tell people, when you start going into bliss states, when things start to suddenly look beautiful, you're driving along and all of a sudden everything is like incredible technicolor. You say, God, it was that beautiful. Profound stillness seems to prevail over all things. And light starts to come from within yourself and you realize that's who you are. It's time to let your friends know that you're spiritually very serious. Because someday while in the middle of a bagel, you'll suddenly get blissed out. And they call the doctors. He catatonic or blissed out or what? Satchidananda, can be very paralyzing. I've been in it, and you cannot function. There's no desire to function. Whether the body falls over and dies, so much the better. You couldn't care less. It's not a reality. And if you still have an attachment to love, not love itself, but an attachment to love, You I consider an error to a, well, no, I won't consider it an error. Not an error. It was the right thing to do. Decide to do it for the sake of someone else, to come back in the body and resume life. No, it's not an error. But so you don't have to go back and backfill because you suddenly transcend whole. You see, you can go there from the pits of hell. In this experience here, it was at the pits of hell. It must have been lower than here. The pits of hell are down below here. I don't want to scare people and tell them what it's like there. But anyway, the pits, you can go from the pits of hell up to an extremely high state and bypass all of it. Why is that? Because the ego is not a reality. You have to undo that which doesn't exist. You just have to bypass it. You don't have to disassemble the ego because it's only illusion that keeps it in place. How many, no, I don't want to ask that. You can go up hundreds and hundreds of points in an instant. And, well, it isn't just an instant, but all of a sudden the landscape changes and one's reality changes, the sense of who you are changes, and one has just transcended all of it. Now, that state may not last. In the beginning, spiritual workers get discouraged because they'll go into a really great state and then disappears. Though that's the black night of the soul, and the Christian saints, a number of them have written about it. Saint this and person and that person. Oh, woe, lover, where have you left me in destitute and blackness and despair? Because the presence is so exquisite that should it leave, you feel a tremendous sense of loss. So in the beginning, these states may come but not stay. They may come and disappear and come and disappear. But each one sets a different level of what's possible, even though in the beginning it may not stay. This is common in Zen meditation. You can go into a state of satori, and then it leaves you when you get up and walk around the room. In fact, in Sanskrit, classically, these various states have been well calibrated over the years in the Hindu tradition. There are states where in meditation you go into an extreme state, but then when you get up and walk around, it disappears. There's extreme states, let's say in the beginning, that only happen when your eyes are closed. Then you lose them if you open your eyes. Then as you get more advanced, the states of samadhi persist even though you open your eyes. Then as you get more advanced, the state of samadhi persists even though you get up and begin to walk around. You get up and walk around and that state continues. Then there's states beyond that which are permanent and nothing affects it, but they're permanent but you can't function. You're permanent but you can't function. Then there is probably the ultimate state in which it persists and yet you are able to function again. Nothing you do changes the inner reality. It is that which is clear and obvious beyond all time, and that which you are is very obvious and clear beyond all time. But by forcing one's attention on a detail, you can force yourself to see what is out there. Ramana Maharshi described that, and it may have been useful in refunctioning in the world. He would say that if you focus your consciousness on the outer world, you're able to function there, and then you can withdraw it, and all the energy goes back into the self. So how to balance all energy being in the self, which may be incapacitating, and all energy being in the world is a matter of learning. So let's have the mantra to remind us the purpose for which we're here today. Because the mantra non-verbally at 740 automatically puts you there, where the great cathedral, the exquisite beauty of the world, shines forth. Then one sees the divinity of all that exists. The expression of all that exists is God manifesting Himself. as that which you are in the present. Listen, Art Thank you very much, and we'll reconvene in an hour. God bless you all. I don't think there's other First question is, what is the one thing I still want in the world? Will the artist please stand up? Who is it? Where are you? Every meeting he brings me something incredible. A T-shirt with my past lives. Today we have a scripture and a 46 Lincoln Continental in stained glass. I mean, that's quite something. The only trouble is, by habit, you let go of everything you want as the wanting goes up, so I might have just disappeared the Continental. Let's see. I still want the Continental Resist. Oh, I hung on to it. Boy, I got scared there for a second. The ego's illusion is if you don't want it, you won't get it. You know what I mean? That wanting it is what gets it for you. So the way I prevent it is I keep wanting it, which prevents it from happening in my life, and then I won't be attached to it. In talking about spiritual work, there's some things I think about, that I should have said. One is when you get into it's like the energy of spiritual work keeps getting stronger and stronger. Finally, one decides to really go for the final run, you know what I'm saying? What that really consists of is a fixity of attention, a relentless staying with it. Let's see how I'm not expressing that correctly verbally. Some people say, well, I've done spiritual work on and off for 30 years and I'm still where I was. Well, they meditate a little there, they pray a little there, they go to a workshop there, they hear a speaker there, they read that. It's all sort of sporadic. Huh? That's all right when you have time. Let's say you're quite a bit in the world and you're accumulating data that you know you're going to use at a later date. Certain understandings, certain comprehensions come about. But then there comes a time when it means to do whatever practice you're doing without exception all the time. A very high state can arise in temporal time, rather brief, if one is committedly persistent. The devotion to the truth becomes overwhelming. The love for God pulls you. It isn't that you're driving it. It's now you're being pulled by your own destiny. By one's own karmic commitment, let's say. You've chosen the ultimate destiny. Now that begins to pull you and attract you. It isn't that you're being driven by it, it's that you're being pulled by it, because that's your destiny. My guess would be that's the destiny of everyone here, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Then comes a time for becoming really very serious about it. At that point, let's say you use the technique that I used the most, was surrendering and letting go everything as the very moment it arises, so that what arises in consciousness is like a wave. It's like 1/100th of a second it's coming, it peaks and then it leaves. So the letting go-ness is at the peak of it, so that one is constantly like floating over the waves. In other words, all these thoughts begin to arise and you intuit their intention of you, and you already released that intention, surrender everything to God. So this becomes continuous, non-stop. I remember trying to let go of a severe attachment, and for 11 days I sat and did nothing but let this go. Every thought, every feeling, every memory, everything, as it arose, was surrendered. You see, because the energy behind some thoughts is accumulated through many lifetimes. The grief that you feel when you lose a member of your family now is not just due to losing them, this person here and now. It's from all the deaths of all the lifetimes accumulated as an accumulation of energy. So when you begin surrendering that, you may pull up a major one that's accumulated through many lifetimes. This particular one, as I say, was nonstop for 11 days, morning and night, just went on and on and on and on. And finally it stopped, gone forever. Never again will you be subject to that. Okay. Then arises the next one. So, serious spiritual work is a continuous willingness to let things go as they arise in the technique that I share. The letting go, the willingness to surrender, wanting to control everything as it arises. The willingness to surrender, wanting to change it, have it your way. The refusal to surrender it to God. Very often one has illusions about the nature of reality. They have to be let go also. That there's a good and a bad, there's a desirable and undesirable, that's all in your mind. So, you realize that the sun shines and then the clouds come up and then the rain falls and the grass grows up and dies. The stock market goes up and down. Age comes and goes. People arise and leave. So you see there's the ebb and flow. And if one is at this part of the cycle, there's no point, crying about it, because the cycle will cycle itself out, you see. And by surrendering oneself to whatever is cycling up is how one disappears it eventually. You disappear it by choosing to be with it and letting go, wanting to change it as it arises. To do that particular technique means to do it continuously, no matter what, non-stop. Usually one can do a run for a period, and then of course when you get more adept at it, to go back in the ultimate state, it takes about an hour of releasing all the things that have been accumulated, and then the state takes over. But then you're immobilized in functioning as far as the world is concerned, you see. But you know it's close by, and let's say a wish like wishing to be comprehended and understood by all to whom I'm speaking, you see, has to be surrendered, because the comprehension of the truth of what I'm saying is not up to the speaker. So those illusions arise, and as they arise, you let them go. That the comprehension of what is being said is up to God, and what is being said is up to God, and there isn't any person saying them in the first place, so there's no person who wishes that you should get it better. But you can see old ego habits arise, So then, when one surrenders everything that stands in the way of the presence is so obvious, so startling, and so overwhelming that there is no question about it. It is profound, it is total, it is all-encompassing, totally overwhelming, totally transforming, and completely unmistakable. Completely unmistakable. That's the minor understatement of the world. So I wanted to make that clear, that you can't complain the spiritual work hasn't worked for you, because it's a profound commitment. If you're doing the Course of Miracles, let's say, it means you got to forgive everything all the time, continuously, no matter what. Doesn't mean you can make an exception here, an exception there. It means continuously, because the one or two things you hide behind is usually a stack. That's why you're hanging on to it. It's not just this SOB you hate, it's a whole stack. And so all of that hides behind this one. So it's not just an innocent, well, I think I'll skip my ex-mother-in-law. No, she was adorable. And when you see her for what she is, the value of humor is also a spiritual technique, because what humor does is it increases you enlarge the context to the point that it disappears polarities. So seeming opposites dissolve into, the comedy dissolves what it seems like the opposite ends. So comedy and tragedy, winning and losing all become one and the same. And it's humorous, you see. So humor is another spiritual technique whereby you dissolve the seeming polarity of the opposites, which also are an illusion, but in so doing, so as you get closer and closer to really a high state, you can't stop laughing sometimes everything is funny, And so someone said here, but as you get near a state of joy, isn't that this question here? No, that's not different. Some said as you get near a state of joy, she starts to cry. And crying is a signal of the onset of a certain state of consciousness. One cries out of let's see, it has names in Catholic theology, ecclesiastic vernacular. There is a word for it. Huh? Rapture? Rapture is a little higher. Rapture is higher. Agape means unconditional love, right? Yeah. Well, there is a going into a state of exquisite sweetness, which makes you cry. The crying is not out of sadness. The crying is out of a joy, but it's a tempered joy. It's not the joy of a high ecstasy. So these are different levels, and in some other writing I do try to discern the various levels. Ecstasy is something different. Ecstasy is an ecstasy in the presence of God, which is beyond description. An extreme ecstasy and extreme joy. So the states of lovingness, bliss, joy, extreme ecstasy, how do they resolve themselves? Because you can't really live in that state. You can't really live in this dimension in that state, or survive in this. So what is the resolution of these states? The resolution is one surrenders the joy, the ecstasy, because the rule is everything is surrendered to God. You surrender the joy, the bliss, the ecstasy. That may not even come to you for a couple weeks. After a couple weeks. Suddenly, like a knowingness is to surrender even the joy. And when the joy and the ecstasy and the exquisite bliss is surrendered to God, then comes the ultimate state, a peace beyond description, a peace of such dimension. It transforms all that exists into an infinite and profound peace, the peace of God, which is beyond all understanding. Then there is an inner quietude which is imperturbable no matter what happens. So that is the ultimate resolution of the high states in which emotions are still pulled in, whether it's joy, ecstasy. The willingness to surrender that state requires the resolve to be willing to let go happiness, joy, and an infinite ecstasy. For God is a great demand. And unless one has acquired that skill, it's unlikely going to happen. Because it is dazzling beyond all imagination. And to think that one has to let this go seems unthinkable. But beyond it is something even greater. The profound peace of God, which is beyond all understanding, is the ultimate. Yeah. Some of these are funny. Anyway. This is funny too. Yeah, this is funny. We already answered that one, huh? Can people below 200 find accurate answers to questions? Yeah, ask somebody who's over 200. There's nothing magical about 200. This is integrity. Integrity is the willingness to tell the truth about yourself and about all things to the best of your ability, to be responsible. The difficulty with a psychopath is even when you've got them fingerprinted, you got the DNA and you got a videotape on him, he sits there and says, I didn't do it. It's profound. You see it on television all the time? They got DNA all over the place, all over the body, all over the walls, all over his car. They got a photograph of him. They got his fingerprints. And he says, I didn't do it. What can you say about that? What can you say about that? Okay, let's see. We're allowed to see. I'm allowed to ask you, what can we say what it is about that? That's what I'm thinking, holding in mind as a fact, resist. They're possessed by lower astrals, resist. Thank you. The reason when the person says, I didn't do it, they didn't. Lower astral did it. You see them all the time on TV. And many times these criminals who kill many people will say, from a certain level of truth, I didn't do that. If he means his ego, no, he didn't do that. But the entity that prevails with it has taken over his consciousness. So for some reason then, if you deny the truth, you're not allowed to access the truth. It's like you can't have the benefits of honesty without being honest. So I think that's the answer to that. The most important thing you want to know about any teacher or entity that channels from the other side. Somebody asked me about a teacher on the other side. The name begins with K. That teacher's over 350 or so. 350 then. 350 is very intelligent and integrous. So that's a very good teacher for us for a certain degree. And when you outgrow a teacher, you sort of sense that you're outgrowing the teacher, and you look for something or some teacher that's somewhat higher. It isn't the height of the teacher, it isn't the calibrated level, it's the suitability for yourself, suitability. Because otherwise, what the teacher is saying doesn't make any sense to you. If you say this teacher doesn't make any sense at all, that's probably the wrong teacher, because if you're here and the teacher is here, they'll make sense to you. But if you're here and the teacher's way up here, then they say you can't really make sense of it. So we have to decide what's best for us at a certain time. And sometimes kinesiology is useful with that. You say, this teacher is good for me at this time. Yes, no, right. And that teacher is good for you right now. The level of consciousness one will reach in this lifetime is predestined. I would say no, because choice is always present. The consciousness level that you enter life with at birth is already preset by your karmic inheritance. And what happens to you during this life is not predetermined innately. However, the circumstances that you find yourself in, the local conditions, will certainly influence what choices you make. So there is a certain karmic spillover, you might say. However, you can go from the depths of hell to the highest states. So I think the answer is correct. You're not constrained by any predetermination. That's true. No, you're not constrained by any predetermination. You're not limited in any way. You start surrendering things as they occur, every feeling, thought, idea, positionality, perception, and you can escalate very, very rapidly. You can go up 150 points in one lecture. So, what does this say? When you do kinesiology, do you check for what? Unconscious slides?
You check for unconscious blocks.
Oh, unconscious blocks. Well, yes, you can have an area that's obscure, and you can pray about that, and I ask God to reveal to me, what is the meaning of that? What is the context which makes this seem to be true to me? And you can also use kinesiology, and you can also do karmic research. Okay? The sound of ah. The sound of ah, the book by John Diamond, Your Body Doesn't Lie, Behavioral Kinesiology, has to do with the sound ah. The sound ah is different than the sound om. And as we pointed out in one lecture, considerably different from aum. The sound ah makes you go strong with kinesiology. So if you feel blown out, upset, and disturbed by something, the thymic thump, you go ha 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 ha. Everybody here know that one? Knock myself out with that one. That activates the thymus gland, which controls the acupuncture system. It tends to take you out of a negative field and back into a positive field. A person may not do well with kinesiology because if they've been listening recently to music that calibrates quite low. There's certain rock groups, for instance, and if they use them as background and you're watching an advertisement and you don't realize that the energy of the music in the back is what's blowing out your acupuncture system right now. And you'll get a false negative. that particular exercise, ha 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 ha. At the same time, you picture something or someone you love, will straighten you back out again. And the effect of negative advertisements, sound, music. One was recently on the news. Pepsi-Cola was contracting with some rock singer or something like that, and I think it was Bill O'Reilly got peed off about it and Ray Sell about it. Anyway, Pepsi-Cola let this guy go. Well, let's see what the energy of that enterprise would have been. We have permission to ask the energy of that particular kind of music. It's below 100, below 90. It's about 95, So you see, if you advertise a product and you put on music that calibrates at 95, what you're doing is destroying your customer base. Because that association is made unconsciously. All right. So on the other hand, ah and the sound m, both ah, so amen has both of them. Let's go with ah. Ah makes one go strong. Makes one go strong. Om is over 700. Om is over 720. Om is over 740. Om is over 750. Om is over 7080. Oh, I was talking about this Om.
Yes, I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let's do this Om for fun.
Because you're doing it and I'm feeling it.
Oh, okay. Well, they're asking about various sounds. In...
do the Om and let everyone meditate, because that's so nice.
Huh?
Do your Om and let
Oh,
everyone meditate.
yeah. Various sounds have different effects. What were we talking about?
the radio.
Oh, yes. Yes, well,
Amen.
let's go AUM.
Amen.
No, AUM makes you go strong, is it? 120, 180, 190, 200, 210, okay. AUM is quite a bit lower than OM, okay. So OM goes 710.
Okay.
The mantra that we play is 740.
Right.
All right, let's see where we can go with OM. We have permission. Amen. Resist. Om is over 700. Om is over 780. Om is over 790. Om is over 800. Om 810. Oh, the old Lord, amen. The Lord God and Son are one. 850, 890, 900, 920. Oh, they're going to pick up the sound of the, I see what they're picking up.
Okay.
990, they're picking up this energy of this consciousness is
Right,
over
right.
990. I see, okay.
Okay.
So it isn't the sound itself, but so the sound Om it is very high. The sound Ah makes you go strong with kinesiology. And that's why Dr. Diamond uses ha, 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 ha. So we've done it, in fact, in groups, because I've given lectures on consciousness and kinesiology for many years. We had groups at Sedona, what you call it? There was a rehab place for alcoholism, a very excellent one too. About 20 beds, 26 beds, and we would do this with a group. And people would come in blown out by their drugs and alcohol and rock music and all that stuff, and they would go like that, and then first they'd be weak. You know, we'd ask them something true, and they would go weak to truth. And then we would have them do these exercises, and now they would go strong with truth and weak with falsehood. So the difficulty with certain kinds of music is that it reverses the field. That which is, you know, if you listen to certain groups, rock groups, now you will go strong with that which is truly wicked, and you'll go weak with that which is divine. So there is a very serious problem affecting the youth, you know. It is the main channel in which the conscious level of youth is being undermined, is coming through the invisible soundless vibration that goes along with such music. The world thinks it's the lyrics. It's not the lyrics. The lyrics are bloody and horrible. But even without the lyrics, the energy that accompanies the music is demonic, you might say, in its effect on human beings, and that it makes them go weak with truth and strong with that which is false. Now, when people go through A Course in Miracles by lesson 75 to 90, he said the normally noxious stimuli like artificial light, etc., no longer make one go weak. What is the reason for this? Oh, well, according to the Course itself, you're only subject to what you hold in mind. Eventually, your own consciousness becomes stronger than the positive power of your own consciousness is stronger than the negative influence of what you might call adverse energies or vibrations. Eventually you become immune to fear, for instance. As I said, you know, what would you do if somebody's about to blow you away with a .45? You just go, because, I mean, it's his problem. He's going to have to face the consequences of blowing you away. I'm not worried about it. But that's true, that's what you do. I mean, I hate loud sounds. That's exactly what you do. You go. You make a face so he'll laugh, so that just as he pulls the trigger, he realizes, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. So you serve him at the last moment, because as he pulls the trigger, he realizes, Jesus, I just made a bad one. Bad mistake. He gets that because of your willingness to love him and forgive him even though he's killing him. So suddenly he wakes up and says, wow, that's the wrong way to go. And that's why you grin and smile at whoever's shooting at you, to keep them laughing, you know what I'm saying? Got to keep him laughing, because otherwise he might go to bad places. You know what I mean? You don't want to go there. All right. So as consciousness advances, you're less and less subject to negativity. Reason is you don't give it any energy, you don't give it any power, and you begin realizing the nature of God is such that the essence and the truth of who you are is unaffected by anything in the world. And the only thing that interferes with it is belief systems. And so the only thing that has power over you is the beliefs of your own mind. So that is apparently, because that's the lesson around lesson 75 in the Course in Miracles. This has to do with aligning one's gifts and purpose with one's spiritual journey. I would say that's the totality of the commitment. You commit all your assets, everything that you're capable of. If you're a good engineer, you dedicate your engineering skills to serving mankind in whatever way, whether it's providing a factory from which people are going to earn a living and life is going to be supported by the... So you surrender whatever skills you have, music or art, whatever your talents may be. In teaching, you teach the children, but you're teaching them from a certain energy, which is so it's the context from which you're teaching the children, not just the content. Because there's some teachers that inspire you, and then there's other teachers that discourage you. There's teachers that are very traumatic. You can have a teacher in grade school that takes years to recover from, right? Many years to recover from. I mean, a horrendously horrific teacher. You talk about surrendering to God. If in non-duality there is no separation or separate this or that, then what is the God that we're surrendering to or being devoted to? Boy, you can't answer that question without begging the question. What is the what of Godness? That's really good. All right, so we'll have to identify the nature of God. We did the nature of God, I think, wasn't it last time that we went through 10 statements, and as a group we all did kinesiology. All right, the God is, so we'll have to go through the levels of God. God is ultimately what you define God as in language, experientially, out of the unmanifest, beyond all form, the infinite potentiality, which is totally and completely unlimited, is the Godhead, described classically as the Godhead. Out of the voidness, it says in Genesis, out of the non-form, arose the manifest as a consequence of the Creator, whose essence is that which creates and which is continuously present. It is out of the potential, the infinite power that it takes to bring existence out of non-existence. So both existence and non-existence are points of view, positionalities. There is neither existence nor non-existence. There is only a point of observation, but that is about 850. It's not a problem till you get around 850. And you get around there, you call me and I'll help you through that one. Do I exist or not exist? Well, I'll tell you. Stop asking the question and it solves itself. Oh, yeah, right. Anyway. I would imagine the person is talking about experientially. There is a level at which the infinite reality is experienced as nothingness. It's very profound. It's very overwhelming. Let's calibrate the void. We have permission to calibrate the void. It's over 900, 920, 960, it's about 960, that's right. A very high state, the pathway of negation, the Buddhist pathway commonly in which the ultimate reality is called void, is the pathway of negation. Negation will get, and at 960 you go into the void, which is very, very impressive. And unless one has been made aware in advance, one would think this is the ultimate reality. It certainly seems ultimate. Until a little knowingness within notices the absence of love, void of everything, and the absence of love is what tells you this ain't it. It's almost it, but not quite it. As you let go identifying with content, you progressively identify and experience the reality of context until finally it becomes overwhelming. It's the substrate of consciousness itself. Behind mind, so we'll go back to this, we'll just review this one chart, which answers the question. All right, here we are. Now this goes on here somewhere, and it's always a puzzle how it goes on. This way, I think. Is that right? Or is it backwards? Right, no. Okay. So this, you begin with, you usually start from the bottom and you move up. Form is the ego linear world of that which we think is real. How do you know that you know that? Because it's registering someplace. How does it register? It registers as a recognition. You recognize a thought, a feeling, a form. You call it doggy, kitty, whatever you want to call it. In meditation, you then come back from the content of what's being witnessed and realize that there's a watcher-experiencer. How do you know what's going on in your mind here? Because there's a watcher-experiencer that's already a substrate to the content. There's a watcher-experiencer. Now, the interesting thing is that all this whole phenomena is going on of its own. And somewhere along in meditation, you realize there is no I doing any of this. There is no I that is recognizing form, naming form. There is a watcher-experiencer. There's a, within itself, within awareness, there's an automatic field in which thinkingness, watching, feelingness is happening of its own. Just like protoplasm bleeds on its own. You don't say, I think I will bleed from this wound. Protoplasm does it because that's the nature of protoplasm. You stick it, it recoils, it bleeds. You realize something impersonal is going on. That within mind there is a witness, witnessing all, no matter what the content is. Same witness sees this movie, same witness sees that movie, same witness sees that movie. The witness doesn't change the movie to movie. You stop identifying with form, you stop identifying with this phenomena. Recognition obviously comes out of the past, and you realize that you're the watcher-experiencer, and then you begin to look for where does the watcher-experiencer coming out of? It's coming out of a more subtle prevailing field. These are called the subtle levels in classic Hindu or whatever spiritual tradition. The subtle bodies. This is physicality of the ego. You start going up through the so-called subtle bodies and through the various chakras in the various subtle bodies. You go to the watcher, the experiencer, which is the third eye of, I forget which body, they've all got wonderful names. And you come to awareness itself. You realize there's only one constant, no matter what's going on, and that's awareness. The content of awareness may shift all the time, but the one basic principle, which is operative always, is awareness. How do you know that? You know because observing and witnessing is going on all the time. Awareness is the nature of the observer-witness, and again, that's not personal. It's happening of its own. that which is attending to the lecture is not personal. It's consciousness itself. It has that quality of registering what's going on. So it doesn't require a personal you at all. The light of consciousness, then, you begin to look at consciousness as the substrate of thinkingness, mind, thought, etc. Under the light of consciousness, you begin to sense that there is an overall field, and that is the context out of which you experience your own existence, or experience yourself as existing, which again is a jump in conclusion, because the reality is that which you are neither exists nor non-exists, because it is actually unmanifest. Now, what was the question? Oh, the whatness of God, yes. That one is the very substrate of consciousness itself. One is the source out of which the substrate of consciousness arises. That which is the substrate of creation and all that exists is not different than the self of your own existence. And there's the awareness that that which you are is identical with all that is. And that's the realization of God as allness. I don't think we even have that on there. The ultimate reality is the oneness and the allness of existence. That takes you beyond 960. We said 960 was void, in which the ultimate experiential reality is void or non-existence. And then you realize that's an illusion. You transcend you let that go, and you realize that the ultimate reality is the allness. God is the source of the allness of all that exists, the very source of existence itself. If you meditate on existence, if you meditate on the quality of existence itself, you'll automatically get taken to the question of, and a realization of the source of existence itself. Not existence as this or existence as that, but the fact of existence. How can that which not exists suddenly exist? What in the world would have the infinite power to create the capacity for existence itself? So the basic evidence for the presence of God within you is your own existence. Without divinity, no existence is possible. Because in the beginning there was only the void, the nothingness and voidness, and there was not. So that which was before the allness of the universes was the infinite potentiality, which in itself was void of form. Void of form. Out of the void arose creation. And we've already outlined how evolution is merely the way in which creation brings itself into manifestation. I saw a really interesting program on TV the other night about army ants. You learn all about the ego and human nature and a lot of spiritual information from watching animal programs. Because the animal programs reveal so much, and some days you're watching an animal program, you get a profound truth about the reality of life itself. But here are these army ants, and they're very ferocious. They're fearsome. It was the 10 most dangerous animals on the planet. Number 1 was the army ant, more ferocious than the water buffalo, more ferocious than a killer dog. More ferocious. The most ferocious thing on the planet is an army ant. They are formidable. The only reason we aren't all destroyed by army ants is they're very much smaller than we are. If they were the same size, there wouldn't be any human beings left, because they eat everything in their pathway. And they're built as killers. They've got these big giant things that just squish you to death and pierce you to death. And then they got killer tails on them, and they're very, very powerful for their size. And they got these giant jaws, so if these don't get you, these will, and they'll turn around and sting you and knock you out that way. So these army ants are really quite impressive, and They arise by the billions. They eat everything in its path. They eat all living things within their path. Like, and one interesting thing, there's a certain kind of an army ant, a soldier ant, whose abdomen, first of all, these killer ants are very adept at calculating the size of the other army. They can send back scouts and send back signals, and they withdraw. Or if they're more powerful, the scouts will signal, in which case they attack and destroy the other colony. Unlike people who often don't know they've lost the war and make you drop another atom bomb on them before they get the point. So anyway, this army ant in particular, he's a specialist, specialist third class, right? So his abdomen can grow like this, and at the proper moment, at the right time, he explodes. This army ant explodes, and when he does, he spits this inner toxic, poisonous chemical that he's held within his abdomen. So he commits suicide in order to kill the enemy. And in so doing brings about, I'm sure, in his own little mind, salvation, right? He gets 9 lady ants on the other side. And you say to yourself, how does this differ from human consciousness at all? It doesn't differ at all. It's identical. Identical thinking, contextualization, techniques even. You blow yourself up to kill the enemy for the sake of winning, your side winning. I mean, this is incredible, isn't it? This little ant knows all this already, and we're just learning it. How can the ant know more than we do? I mean, they know when they're winning and when they're not winning, and when they're not winning, they take off, We hang in until they've slaughtered every last German or Chinaman or whatever, After the war is lost, they throw in more and more legions of soldiers who are then slaughtered into meat. And how come the ant knows more than that? So I just thought it was interesting because the evolution of consciousness, you see, the visible world of life, animal life, is nothing but the outpicturing of that which has already occurred on the level of consciousness. So evolution is obviously occurring on the level of consciousness. So this whole paradigm of army and scouts and winning and blowing yourself up against the army already exists on the, you might say, psychic plane. Right? Let's see if that's so.
I have one question. Do the ants get 70 virgins?
Huh?
Do the ants get 70 virgins?
Okay, so this pattern already exists on the psychic plane. Okay, this pattern which I just described is coming from the lower astral resist. It's an lower astral pattern resist, which then manifests through anything that calibrates under 200 resist. Okay, so anything that calibrates under 200 is fair game for the lower astral resist. Wow, no wonder. That explains the phenomenon of the world, right? Anything that's not integrous and not committed to truth is fair game to be dominated by the lower astral. Therefore, the murderer easily gets taken over because he just crashed from 200 down to minus something or other, and instantly he's now fair game for an entity to take over. Okay. All right, so then I see what the whole pattern is. It makes sense. So we learn a lot about spirituality from watching the Animal Channel. Yes, how can you raise a child not to develop an ego? Well, you can't. You can give them spiritual standards, because by spiritual standards, unconsciously, if not consciously, the child will then begin evaluating its own behavior. If you're a good parent and loved, so that you're incorporated within their psyche, interjected, it's called in psychoanalysis, you interject the parent. If it's a good parent, that becomes the ego ideal. In Freudian language, the ego ideal is the ultimate of what you want to become. So if your father teaches you not to flinch in the face of pain, then you develop the capacity to have amputations without anesthesia, because this is an ideal that you powerfully energize. So the parents are setting up our ideals and standards by which the child is consciously, as they grow up. We teach them to be kind to animals, to be kind to each other, to forgive instead of retaliating, to try and see that the other person can't help being the way they are, because you can't forgive them if you see them as bad, but you can feel sorry for them as not being able to help themselves and pray for them. So we set up these spiritual ideals which become incorporated within one's sense of ethics. And so I think we do a lot for our children by bringing our own spiritual awareness as something that we strive for. You also want to set up a mechanism whereby the child doesn't feel guilt if they fail to reach that level. This is what we strive for, and we sometimes fail because the nature of the mind and the human brain is that we're not going to win every time. But that's all right, because it isn't whether you win or lose, it's the direction that you go. So if the child just gets the direction is of caring for yourself and caring for others and trying to perfect yourself as best you can, that's going to be an ideal that's going to stay with them all these many years since. So the beauty of spirituality, the beauty of religion at its highest expression, can stay with you for a lifetime. Just to experience a great cathedral with the full choir and a full orchestra and the sun coming through the windows and the beautiful incense and the magnificence of the architecture, the carving, the obvious reverence of the people is a profound impact in your psyche, That forever will have an impact. And anything that falls less than that subtly will not be accepted within the mind. You may accept it for 20 or 30 years, but after a while you give it up. Never had this one. What's the sighting of FUOs all about? And being abducted by aliens. I don't know if we can allow to act this. We might blow some of the people out here.
Can we ask that question?
Okay, we have permission to ask this in front of this audience.
Oh.
This is an integrous audience, mature, and can handle it. UFOs are primarily perceptual misinterpretations, resist. A UFO, as commonly defined, is an existent reality, resist. No, not an existent reality. I saw UFOs one time, and then I tested out with a kinesiologist who says they weren't. Darn it. I'll tell you how it came about.
Okay.
Because it explains how anybody can come to believe this. Friends were driving in another car. We were going up to First Mesa, up to some Indian reservation. We were going up for the snake dance or something. Anyway, we're in separate cars. As we get up to Flagstaff, we're going from Flagstaff on up towards First Mesa up there. I forget the name of the Indian town. But anyway, I saw two silvery, two silvery space vehicles or planes or balloons or something. And they were way up in the sky, and they were quite a bit distant, probably 30 miles ahead of us. All of a sudden they stopped. All of a sudden they moved sideways like that. They moved at right angles quickly. I thought, good God, what is that? So when we arrived at our destination, we got out of the cars, and I said, did you see that? And he said, yeah, those big silvery spheres that suddenly moved at right angles. Wow, we thought we've seen UFOs. Only a UFO can go from a standstill, make a right angle, and go somewhere. Let's just test my personal experience. They looked like UFOs. resist. I semi-believed that they were UFOs at the time, resist. They were not UFOs, resist. So even though you see perception, as I described the perception, you would say, well, I don't believe in UFOs, but by God, what were those things? How could they go at a right angle like that suddenly, out of nowhere? A pair of them, suddenly go off like that. So you can see how people can easily arrive at the belief that there are such things. Because perception is. What about being abducted by aliens? Oh, this is scary. I don't know if I want to know this one. I'm susceptible to getting abducted by aliens, resist. It's possible, I know the answer to this one. It's possible to be physically abducted by aliens, resist. It's possible for your astral body to be abducted, resist. There's where the event is happening. See, the event is happening. People that see apocalyptic endings of the world and all, you're talking about a different dimension. It's true in that dimension. There was a spiritual teacher well known here in Sedona, now deceased, who described that he experienced this vision. And all his followers prepared for the eventualities, underground houses and the final days and survivalism and all that. The conviction with which he told it was convincing to the listener. But what you don't get is he's describing accurately what went on, but what goes on in a different dimension. Understand that? There's different dimensions. We live in a different dimension. So he was talking about a lower astral vision, the same as the book of Revelation resist. He's talking from the same level, about 70, as the book of Revelation. So throughout history, mankind has reported with great conviction, because it was experiential and real, that such and such is true. The only thing they didn't know, it is not the same dimension as this. I can have a patient who goes into a state, that we would call, from our viewpoint, psychotic state, delusional state, which all these tremendously horrible paranoid happenings are happening. They're being kidnapped and tortured and killed and all this. And experientially, subjectively, it's a reality to the person. There's no point in trying to talk people out of paranoid delusions, because you're not going to talk them out of it, because their experiential reality is, for the same reason you think that I have two legs. You see two legs here experientially, you say he has two legs. Now somebody says he doesn't have two legs, he only had one leg. Well, I saw two legs, you know what I'm saying? The subjective reality is convincing because it is an experience, it's experiential. It's not that they're mistaken, it's just that they don't understand it's a different dimension. There are various ways to access other dimensions, drugs, all kinds of weird esoteric practices, certain tantric practices. They're all designed, whirling around, going into a trance, using various kinds of drugs, shamans, and exercises and sorcery, and invoking demons. You can begin to explore other dimensions. If you're seriously spiritually committed, I advise against it strongly. One of these is going to grab you by the ankle and say, "Gotcha." Gotcha. Gotcha. Why? Because these other dimensions have been there a long, long time, longer than humans. The lower astral dimension has been a powerful dimension, longer than mankind. We're just amateurs. Let's see if that's true. The lower astral preceded mankind, resist, and has been there for millennia, long before mankind arose. There you go. The other dimensions, the lower astral entities, have been kings and gods of their own domains for millennia before mankind even appeared. So you're not going to go into their dimension without paying the entrance fee. That's why I advise people to avoid channeling, because you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know what the intention of the entity is on the other side. You have a hard enough time being able to comprehend the intention and level of consciousness and spiritual integrity of people that are here visible and in bodies. Can you imagine what you're trying to do with something on the other side named Joshua, and he's talking to you from ancient mystery schools, and oh my God, give me a break. I'll give you a magical sign and symbol, you do that, and you'll become an initiate in the mystery school of right. All the spiritual truth you ever need throughout this and any other lifetime is already readily available on this planet, because the truth is spoken by every avatar, every great guru, every great integrist teacher has always been the same, and you don't need any other. And the reason you're looking for something else is because you don't want to do what's real. It's a way of escaping legitimate, real spiritual work, is to go off with Guru Baba, who's channeled from the other side, and tells you to buy llamas this year and sell them on the stock market or whatever, you know what I mean? All this kind of BS. Why would God be of any interest, what you do with your assets and all? Because to God, they aren't even assets. Only you think it's an asset. No. All the truth that's been necessary to know to reach every enlightened state all the way to sainthood and all the way to enlightenment has already been spoken, is already available, and anything else is just an avoidance. Let's see if that's so. Everything else is an avoidance and a resistance, an unconscious resistance. Okay, so seeking out that which is not the truth is an unconscious resistance to the truth. Because to reach the truth, you've got to surrender certain illusions about yourself, and you would rather believe in the mystification from some enchanting Baba on the other side, rather than surrender the fact that you're getting a lot of juice out of being mad at people. You know what I'm saying? Legitimate spiritual work may seem boring and mundane and prosaic compared to the excitement of mystical chants and mystical symbols and mystical insight information, and ascending in the hierarchy, which usually costs you a few thousand each one. You get to go from junior to senior to master to supermaster. This is $5,000, this is $10,000, this is $20,000, this is $25,000. So there seems to be some other motivation. We'll take a break in a couple of minutes, and then afterwards we'll just sort of have informal questions, and I'll meet and talk with people as they wish. There's a question about astral travel. Well, I've already pretty much answered it. If you want to reach enlightenment, it's best to avoid astral travel. Astral travel can take you to an infinite number of realms. Each realm is ruled by a demigod, resist, who is in turn ruled by another one in an endless, infinite number of possible dimensions. You see? Thank you. You see, this is only one dimension, but there's an infinite number of dimensions. Out of the infinite potentiality of everythingness arises an infinite number of realms. There's an infinite number of realms, of which this is only one. You have enough trouble understanding this one. There's no point of taking on other realms. each of which is tailored for a different purpose by different entities in a different context, which you don't know. Even if you get entreated to join something from another dimension, remember one fact, that you're not going there. They're in a different dimension. And you're not going to go where they are. So even if you do what they say, you're not going to be one of them, because they're in a dimension which does not include you. They've leaked through, they must say. You get that on radios. The purpose of a limiting circuit in a radio, in the old days, if you turned on a radio, you got all the stations from all around Chicago and Milwaukee and Sheboygan and Wisconsin. You have to have limiting circuits. The limiting circuits prevents all these cross channels because otherwise everything you turn on, you're going to get 4 or 5 channels. These limiting circuits are there to prevent crossing over from one channel to another. So first master this channel, and then if you want to go to elsewhere, go ahead. Except when you master this channel, you find there really are no other channels. There aren't any other real dimensions. But that in itself is an illusion. But you've got to then be the master of all dimensions and transcend all that. You've got to be over 1,000. That takes 1,200 to realize. First master this dimension, and then see if there are any other dimensions, and if you want to go there. And then you realize there are no other dimensions because the completion of allness is all that there is. And it is greater than all dimensions. One could spend an infinite amount of time just exploring one of these alternate dimensions. You can listen to WGN round the clock. You can also get WBBM. You can also get WINS. You can also get WTMJ. You can also get... And you would see that you would spend an infinity in exploring all the potential dimensions, none of which is necessary. Because the ultimate reality beyond all of them is exactly the same. The ultimate reality beyond all of them is exactly the same. Let's see if that's a fact. The ultimate reality beyond all dimensions is something I may ask right now, is exactly the same for all. Okay. So there's no advantage to any other dimension in which Master so-and-so takes you to this astral realm, who then meets you with somebody else who takes you to another astral realm. And there are people in Sedona that spent their whole lifetime doing that. They're on realm number 42, you know what I mean? I got news for them. You only got about 999,000 more realms to explore. And in the year 5,942, you'll get a teacher that says, hey, you're chasing your tail, because as you chase your tail, more dimensions are getting spun off the wheel. You understand? There's an infinite number. And that is the whole purpose of the lower astral, is to keep you going round and round endlessly and never becoming enlightened. Because that which hates God has set itself up to distract all that is attracted to God. So don't forget that as you evolve, you're going to become meat. You're going to become the target. You're going to become that which all that hates God is attracted to and wants to pull out of the game. Okay? So the upside of love is bliss, happiness, and the awareness that love and God are one and the same. The downside is, then we'll quit. The downside is when you get into a state of bliss, lovingness, is you drop your guard. You see, everyone is pure and innocent. They're innocent but not pure. Don't forget the sheep in wolf's clothing. So when they see that you're a blissful, happy little spiritual warrior and you're bumbling down the street, you become fair game for every lower astral that can like to pull you out of the circuit, okay? Without seeing them as evil, you just realize you want to decline the invitation. You want to decline the invitation to follow that which is non-integrous. If it doesn't meet the test of integrity, you know, Jesus said just avoid it. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to go against it. You don't have to denounce it. Just don't go there. Just don't vote for that candidate. And you know who I mean. People can be genuine to their own belief systems, except their own belief systems are delusional. That's the only problem. All right, so we'll stop now, and all that want to, after a break, we'll answer more questions. We'll meet people personally, maybe answer some of their personal questions. Somebody is asking us when we're going to be at the Church of Agape in Los Angeles. That's October 19th. We'll be at the Church of Agape October 19th. I've never been there. I haven't been on a plane since 9/11. But we're going to fly there. because it must be fun to see what it's like nowadays, if it's any different or not. And you say it's not a good time to make wisecracks, so I'll have to watch myself. Am I supposed to take this body with me on the flight? I mean, come here, boy. Take all your clothes off. We got to see if you're all right. We just thought we'd answer some more questions. Something came up about the lower astral. Everything I've learned about it is you don't want to go there. Let me ask that question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somebody asked the question, can you evolve upwards from the lower astral? We have permission to ask this in front of this audience. Resist. Do you have the karmic permission to evolve from the lower astral and resist? That's why you don't want to go there. Remember the Buddha said, fortunate are you that you're a human being. Slim are the chances to be born a human, because the human has the chance to evolve all the way to enlightenment. Rarer still is the desire to reach enlightenment, and rarer still are those who have heard of enlightenment, be born human, and have not taken advantage of this golden opportunity. Therefore, waste no time. Waste no time. You can waste no time very simply, because as everything arises in the ordinary course of ordinary life, you just constantly surrender it to God. You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to do that, you know. Would I be willing to surrender that to God? Those of you who have done the 12-step programs, the third step is you surrender your life to God as you understand Him. And Course in Miracles, all the really basic spiritual programs, many of which calibrate in 200 or 300s, but they're solid, basic stuff, to surrender everything to God, to hold back nothing, to ask God questions if you don't know the answer, to ask for guidance from the Holy Spirit within you, ask for a miracle. And you can often just tell the Holy Spirit, I don't get it. And just, all of a sudden, as you say, I don't get it, as you walk out, suddenly you get it. I mean, very prompt. I don't know. You get very prompt answers a lot of times. Is there an ultimately best process for releasing, surrendering, etc., everything to God? That's the willingness. We said the power of willingness. See, devotion, love takes many forms. One form it takes is a powerful decision. When you make a decision to say no to that which is non-integrous, that's really a very powerful step. I'm not going to go there, and whatever the consequences, I'm not going there. So commitment, the willingness to let everything go. It doesn't mean you're going to succeed the first time you let go of a certain desire or wantingness or resentment. Doesn't mean necessarily the first time you let it go. We said because a lot of these things are an accumulation of many lifetimes, and we'll get to that next week. A repetitive pattern shows up over long expanses of time. This is just one episode. One's life is not this episode. This is just an episode. This is this particular physicality. One's life transcends many physicalities. So a pattern can persist and persist and persist. So as you let go, try to let go of it. It doesn't always let go right away. But the very fact that you were willing to surrender it and that you did actually go through the process is already a karmic merit, so that eventually you're building up, you might say, undoing all the negative karmas, and now all of a sudden one day you let it go and it disappears. I don't know, they just don't get you mad anymore. You used to fantasize killing them and murdering them and getting even with them. And now you don't give a rap about them one way or the other. Like little mice, mice run around, I think they're cute, One time I'm sure I hated them, was afraid of them. And, but now I think they're sort of cute. So I chase them out, I hate to kill them. Because then I'll miss them and they're going to go off in another body elsewhere, but not in my backyard where I can have fun with them, see? Can you elaborate calibrations beyond 1,000? Such calibrations are possible. Well, we don't want to really go into this. Yeah, okay. Such calibrations are not possible.
Do we have permission?
We have permission, resist. To answer the question, resist. It's possible for the physical nervous system to handle everything, something over 1,000. It's possible for the human nervous system to handle consciousness energies over 1,000, resist. No. It says no. Somebody said, if this last time you came out of the void, did you leave you left the last time in the void, resist. We have permission on that one. The prior lifetime was left in the void, resist, yes. The prior lifetime, in fact, the ultimate truth was voidness as far as I knew. And that's a certain spiritual pathway which is integrous, because it's based on a conviction that that is the ultimate truth. And it's based on a mistranslation, I think, of the teaching of the Buddha. Because it is only really a matter of contextualization. The difference between allness and nothingness is a very subtle discernment. On a certain level, that which is all thereby becomes nothing, you understand? Because to be something, you would have to be differentiated from the rest. So, to be all that is in a way being nothing, but it is more complicated than that verbalization about it. So the capacity to let things go is, first of all, a matter of practice, a matter of direction, a matter of habit, a matter of willingness, and basically it's really devotional. So the underpinning of any spiritual practice is devotion, the willingness to surrender all to God. And that's what gives us its power. With practice, it becomes habit. With practice, it becomes habitual. You let go wanting to change it. I was talking out back about being stopped by a cop at 1 o'clock in the morning on 89A. We were the only ones on the whole highway. Nobody's out there at 1 o'clock except me and this squad car behind me. And I figure, I'm looking at my speedometer, I'm thinking, I'm going 40. Why is this guy tailing me? So finally he pulls me over, flashes his lights. And I said, what can it be? He says, you're weaving. I said, weaving? What is weaving? He said, you're going back and forth over the yellow line. And I'm thinking, we're the only people on the whole highway. What am I going to do? Stay in my lane? There's nobody else here but me. So he says, are you drinking? I said, no, I haven't had a drink in 40 years. So he says, you take dope? Smoke stuff? I said, no. You willing to take a so-and-so test? I said, sure. He says, walk this yellow line. I walked this yellow line. He said, I know, there's still something wrong with you. And he's scratching his head. He said, well, what do you think's the matter with you? And I said, you want me to be truthful? He says, yeah. I said, I don't feel like I'm really in my body. He said, good God, he says, I've had this exactly the same experience. So it was an actual experience. I'm surrendering this to God, and if he gives me a ticket, he gives me a ticket, so let it be. He said, gosh, he said, I'm really glad to have met you. And then I told him I'm a doctor and a psychiatrist and all, and that gave him really more firepower. And I told him, I go out of body. I said, if I don't remember to come back in it, I can wander off because, if you're wandering across in the middle of the night, you're not thinking about what you're doing, So anyway, he was greatly relieved. He said, this worried me for years. He said, now I know what it is. I said, you just will yourself to be back in the body, and bang, you go back. He says, terrific, So we left the best buddies, shook hands, hugged. So, one sign of being out of your body is you weave. But he was really a nice officer, you know, he really was. He said, I really have been worried about that, and here he found somebody he could ask about it. And I said, you know, you're not connected with your body space, which is one problem that you have when you're first going into certain higher states. You don't know where your body is in space. It's very difficult to navigate because that which is the central controller is gone. See, everything you do is oriented from some imaginary space somewhere in the middle of your head. When that disappears, where you are in space is not all that clear at all. It's still not all that clear very often.